Hey guys, Spacey here, and welcome to Koura's podcast, Filmmaking Actually. On this episode, Koura asks, what does it take to be a director, actually? And she has a guest, Emmy-nominated director Michele Civetta. Through his production company, Quintessence Films, he has directed commercials for Coca-Cola, Dunkin' Donuts, and NBC, directed music videos for Lou Reed, Sparkle Horse, Ladytron, and Sean Lennon's Friendly Fire, which, side note from me, that's how I discovered Michele's work. He's commissioned shorts by directors like David Lynch, Kenneth Anger, and Gaspar Noé, and directed feature-length films, including Agony, released in 2020 through Gravitas Ventures, starring Asia Argento, and his latest film, The Gateway. It's got an all-star cast: Bruce Dern, Olivia Munn, Shea Whigham, Frank Grillo, Mark Boone Jr., Taryn Manning, and Keith David, just to name a few names. One brief note here. I was feeling under the weather at the time that this interview took place, and that is mentioned in passing, but instead of editing that part out, I just left it in for the sake of preserving as much as possible the liveliness of Michele's and Koura's conversation. I really learned a lot and felt a great sense of camaraderie from listening to this conversation. So if you want to know what it takes to be a director, I think you will learn something from this too. So, okay, that's it from me. So enjoy.
You lead me down whichever rabbit hole you want to go.
Well, let's start just as a general, thank you for being here and for sharing your story and sharing everything with me and with everyone who listens to this podcast. Could you tell me just a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
It's great to be with you today, Koura. I grew up in New York City and was kind of born and bred kind of up and down the East Coast. And I got involved, I guess, kind of creating more like short stories and like writing kind of like in my teenage years. And that sort of slowly led me into, the entertainment thing, just a bunch of movies along the way. It just kind of informed my opinions that for whatever reason, my dad was from Italy. And so as kids, we grew up watching a lot of spaghetti westerns and stuff. And, when I started to watch more, I don't want to say they're not serious movies, but they're kind of general populist kind of cowboy flick fun stuff. But I came across Paths of Glory by Stanley Kubrick and then some of the Fellini stuff. And it never occurred to me that, one person ostensibly was behind the vision of making these movies. So I got real interested in just, that process, I guess, kind of in my mid-teen years. And so from there, I just, kind of set out to go to film school and then started to work a fair amount in my early 20s, shooting a lot of music videos and commercials. I was pretty lucky in the sense that it was at that first wave of the internet bubble, as they were calling it. So there's a lot of .com startups. And so they were actually looking for younger people to be doing a lot. So I kind of cut my teeth in, more or less commercial filmmaking, shooting ads and stuff. And it was terrific because, I always maintained a pursuit that I wanted to be making movies and telling stories in that area. But you at least at one point had, resources and budgets to make these shorter kind of content things. So I learned a ton along the way, how to work with crews. And so, that always has more or less been the bedrock of what you can put into your next project moving forward, just all that, applied field theory.
Totally. That's awesome. Where in New York are you from?
I grew up uptown, Upper East, actually.
Okay. I moved back to Manhattan when I was about 15, and I did a work study program there, and then I got an internship in LA and moved to LA when I was just before I turned 17. It was kind of crazy.
Whoa, that is crazy. That's a crazy time to be in LA. I was there for the first time around that time bracket when I was 17, 18, and it's a crazy city.
Yes.
When you're young.
Yeah, I got out of there eventually.
No, I get it.
Anyway, I will go back to my questions now. I didn't realize you were a New Yorker too, so that just makes you cooler. How would you describe your creative process?
My creative process, I think it's cumulative. I like to call it applied field theory. So it's experiences that you have along the way inform what you're trying to do. And so and what I'm doing these days, I'm just trying to keep it as truthful to myself as possible. So my ex-wife and I used to have a phrase that we would call it art therapy, that you basically try and cull from that which is, relevant in your life, that has bearings, and you got to see yourself in what you do. And so, I work in a number of different types of facets of visual medium. So it's like some stuff is more visual, but as time goes on, I really like to dig into characters and stories that I at least can maybe solve riddles in my own personal life by doing that. You can hook into emotionally,
Yeah, I have to say that resonates with me very, very much. And then I guess kind of along that same line, how would you, I guess you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how do you select the stories that you want to tell? Like, what makes a project speak to you?
Typically I've always written whatever I do. Like almost every movie I've worked on, and many of them unsuccessfully because I've had about 3 movies set up with studios and fall apart along the way. It's always been either a book I've optioned or something I've written, kind of standalone. In the instance of The Gateway, it was an old friend of mine actually, as a producer now, and he had what he considered a really terrific standalone, like genre piece kind of thriller, like an inner city crime thriller. When he gave it to me, he was like, look, if you can rewrite this and get it to a place that pops off the page and just has more dynamics and more complexities, it's something we can go make right away. So what I like to think in this story is like, I found a way to personalize it for myself, like we were talking about earlier. And like, find that particular window in that, you can articulate a world and the characters in that world. So, I think it became more of a neo-noir tapestry piece, whereas initially it was much more, lack of better terminology, like cops and robbers kind of standard boilerplate stuff. No disrespect to the original script, but that's what you have to do if you're going to create something. You have to be able to see yourself in it to some degree, because our goal is to speak truths about things. You can only write from that which you know, I think.
And again, that just goes right into my next question, which is how do you go about developing something from a screenplay to the screen? Like both the technical side of it, but also like there's so much that can happen from an idea on paper to filming it on set and then even through the editing process. So kind of, yeah.
All storytelling visually, it really combats the time equation, meaning like you have a finite amount of time to work on something because of the economics of storytelling. So, if you're a painter, you can ostensibly spend a year on a painting, do a layer, walk away, so on and so forth. With this, it involves so many people. And so, I always, for whatever reason, go back to the title of this Tarkovsky biography, which is called Sculpting in Time. I don't think he meant it in this reference point, but what I feel like when you're filmmaking, you're actually sculpting in time. You have one specific moment with all these people here, and you have to, kind of fabricate a vision and unify all of that. So in the prepping process, what is so vital is to have everything as organized as you can see fit for the course of the day, to actually be free enough during the course of that day to discover, because so much of it's about architecture. Are we shooting these order of scenes correctly? Like, is this the greatest expenditure of our time to, have time to discover like dramatic moments in scenes that you're working with actors, and then, you hope you get it right as best as you can. They always say like collect as many pieces as you can, because you're going to basically go back and reassemble this puzzle when you're all done with it. And that's the other thing, is the editing, they always say, is the great opportunity to rewrite the film. And for example, on this movie, The Gateway, I was super fortunate because I had an editor named Susie Elmiger, who's been working since the last period of Robert Altman's films. Like, she started working with him, and it's a process yet again of a different set of optics that you kind of let go, but you also trust the process with somebody who guides you through it to articulate, kind of what all of that is. And ultimately, the one other aphorism I have is movies are not so much finished as just abandoned. Eventually you just walk away, and then, you have to articulate what it is again and again as you watch it, So I don't know. That's the process as I see it these days.
I love that. I've definitely been there where you're like, you know what? We're done. Like, that's it. Just stop. Like,
we can go no further.
That's why I don't know if you've ever done those like 48-hour film projects or anything like that. That's one of the reasons that I love doing them, is because you have to stop. Like eventually you have to finish the script because you have to start filming because you're running out of time.
Totally.
And like that mentality of like, okay, good, just stop. Decide that this is it.
And it's a good thing. You know, you can't over prepare. People get stigmatized also being like, oh, I'm going to write it so perfect. And then it's good. But we always have these mechanisms for self-sabotage and questioning it. Sometimes you got to just be ready to like jump into the fire. I mean, things are what they are. They're imperfect, which is, you know, sometimes some of the best artwork comes that way. You know, if you go to like punk rock or, you know, people find ways to express with limited tools, you know?
Yeah, totally. You mentioned working with the actors. I know I hate that the world usually kind of puts directors into two categories. There's the ones that are like sitting next to the DP, like micromanaging all the tech stuff. And then there's the ones that like give the DP free rein and they're micromanaging the actors. I personally think the best directors have a good understanding of both and can let the DP do their job and the actors do their job and direct what they're looking for from both. Where would you say you fall? Are you like a heavier on the tech side or heavier at the actors or a middle ground? Or
I think I kind of calibrate in the middle. You know, like I used to be much more of a visually hands-on filmmaker, like it's all camera, more ornate sets and stuff like that. But, you know, as time goes on, I've learned your craftsmen are so much more capable of what they do than you will be. So you can guide that process. You can, you know, talk about how you see it and obviously make micro adjustments. But, you know, movies are really, they're an actor's medium. I mean, I know there's a lot of fallacy like, oh, it's an auteur's, you know, thing, but the actors are the ones you associate with on screen, and they're the window that you can kind of take that leap into believability. And so, you know, I feel like the earlier phase of my work, I was always a bit more reticent about really rolling up my sleeves and digging into the process with actors because it's intimidating. But as time goes on, it's the most malleable form of the creation, I think. So right now it's all about the actors, but, you know, I certainly run around with cameras on my back and stuff like that for fun also.
I saw obviously I like looked on IMDb and stuff like that and tried to do a little bit of homework. So I noticed that for some projects you're a writer-director, for some you're writer-director-producer, for some you have other producers. This is kind of a two-part question. How do you know, and I don't know, maybe this is a bit of a self-serving question because like for me personally, my dream is to like find a perfect producer to have as a partner, because being on set, the most obnoxious thing in the world is to not be focused on the story, but to be worried about when everybody's eating lunch and having to focus on the story and having to make sure the next people are like, it's
a lot for the brain to process.
Too much. Is there a difference in when and why you would produce or wouldn't produce? And how do you know, like, okay, this is a good partnership. This is kind of what I need in a producer. And that may be a self-serving question, but I think it's important for directors to know what makes a good partnership and to know when a production partner is a good person to kind of connect with. And multi-layered question. Sorry.
No, it's a super interesting question, you know, and it's not easy because, you know, ultimately I think as a filmmaker, you know, you're unfortunately responsible for understanding almost everyone's job ultimately. So you do have to understand what the gaffers do, what editors do to a certain extent, what, you know, production design is. But a producer, you know, really is there to guide the process and have your back. And, you know, there's a lot of kinds of producers, whether it's more of a creative producer who develops material in tandem with you, producer who really understands how to work their way through the finance process and, you know, distribution. You kind of learn a bunch of that over the way. And like, I always felt like I needed to understand more. To your question, it's like, I don't really know when it's something that you're more involved in. Sometimes it's obvious, but you really have to be aware of all those facets, I think, along the way. But, you know, a great producing partner will have your back. And so, you know, when you're actually on that set, you're focusing only on the film. You know, but with that said, there's producing stuff coming up left, front, and center. So you're still sometimes casting when you're in the process of making a movie. So, your producer can help you with that, but that's unfortunately like a filmmaker's job as well. So, there's always that fine juncture between art and commerce. You have to be aware of what the bottom line is, as well as what the creative is. So like with that, you make a lot of decisions that I think aren't vaguely producer oriented as well. So it's like, it is what it is. But I think in a perfect world, you have someone you can really go forward with everything with, that really understands how you like to work and the specifics of, a lot of assets or facets in what it takes to get movies made or music videos or commercials, whatever it is.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. How involved do you tend to get with the production process? Like, I know you mentioned that there's the creative producer side, that's just the developing of the project and getting it ready to work. But then there's also the, like, I call them the boring producers, but like the budget, the managing of the finances, they work with the AD to set the schedule. Like, obviously the director is involved with that too, but like, it's more the how many hours, how many days, how many people, how much background can we afford? Where are we going to go to lunch? What's our timeline? What festivals are we going to? What press things can we afford? Like all that stuff. Yeah. I guess I should say more the business side of it. Do you tend to stay away from that side and just focus on the creative, or do you find kind of one foot in each camp, as it were?
I like to get my hands dirty wherever, I can. So I'm not afraid to get messy. So like a line producer probably has one of the hardest jobs on a film, because they're really running the machine, making certain everything shows up, that the costs are coming in effectively day per day. With equipment and stuff like that, it's important that you understand what you have the ability to be using, because it does impact, your schedule, like both equipment choices being made on how much are you spending on art versus this one location we're getting. It becomes just a gigantic tug of war in all these different directions. So, that I think is kind of part of the actual filmmaking process as a director, because you have to problem solve, For the rest of it, I'm unfortunately learning this week that the whole marketing part of it is it's a huge portion of what you got to do as a filmmaker. So you got to still be aware of what occurs afterwards in terms of how you navigate, whether it's film festivals or all that stuff. It's, it's not as easy as it used to be to launch movies these days either. So hopefully you have the right people along the way, but the more you can keep your eyes and ears open to everything, like I just don't ever like to say, oh, it's entirely their job. It's like, you have to kind of meet halfway where you can, because it will, I think, lead to better results.
Yeah, for sure. That isn't like, I think, what's the word? Pan-determinism, like as a filmmaker.
That's a good phrase.
You mentioned a little bit about the talent and casting. What is your approach towards working with talent, like both from the casting side, and then for me, I really love if I see a tape, like if somebody submits a self-tape and it's so close, like it could be good, but I can't really tell if it was just a bad take or whatever. If I have the time, if it's a project where we can do this, I'll give them some feedback and ask them to send another one, just to see if it's, maybe they'll be good enough, not good enough, but maybe they can hit that particular, like what I'm looking for. And if we're doing live casting, especially for callbacks, again, if somebody's close, I'll try and like work with them a little bit. I've been in casting rooms where the director is just sitting there and the people are just coming in and reading and leaving and reading and leaving. And they're just like, I'm just waiting for someone to do it differently. And in my head, I'm like, okay, every single actor we just saw just did the scene the exact same way. So I'm going to assume that the way it's written reads that way, and you probably should give them a note if you want them, like they're not.
You have to correct the tonality if you see it some way. And it's fair to give actors something to work with so they can actually not just have a preconceived idea, without at least a conversation. It's hard when you're casting because sometimes there's a lot of roles or whatever, but it's so important because, you'll like exactly what you're saying, Koura, like find someone, they maybe seem like they fit the part, but then you don't know where the range is in terms of, how seasoned they are, like, do they have the ability to like play a little bit funny as well? Or so, to have that opportunity to do a second callback or whatever it is, watch them with some notes, doing a self-submit or something. It's amazing how much it'll change along the way. And we've had a few great actors on this film through that process, just by, seeing what somebody was initially and then saying, oh, can you read even for this other part? And it's amazing, where you'll see their range just in reading 2 or 3 different characters and you're like, okay, this person's got it.
Yeah, for sure. How about like once an actor is on set, what do you find like the best way to work with an actor? If like, do you do a bunch of rehearsals ahead of time? Do you do any read-throughs with them in advance? Do you just give them the script, get on set, work it out once you're there? What's kind of your process for working with talent?
Yet again, it comes down to schedule and like art and commerce ultimately, because in a perfect world, you rehearse the hell out of it, for a week before, like do table readings and really make adjustments on the script together. And in the case of this last film, just because everyone was very busy and coming and going for other things, it was like we had an opportunity to review the scripts together in person, like write up notes and kind of know how we're going to come at it. And more than anything, it was just important to get to know each other as best as possible, before you really go off on the adventure. So like in the case of this film, there was, a mother-daughter relationship between Olivia Munn and Tegan Burns. And so it was important that they kind of bonded just so they knew each other before like day one. So like they would go see movies together, go out to eat. And, you keep some of your actors apart as well. You don't want them to necessarily have any interaction before they're actually on screen together. So it has a different kind of volatility. With that said, there was, a lot of rewriting going on throughout the process, and then a lot of the adjustments, I think, really, unfortunately, have to occur really day of. But I like that spontaneity because it seems like it's a little dizzying, but you really get to a point of like core visceral honesty if you're not afraid to dig in and say, like, what is the scene about? And I was super lucky on the last film because it was like super high level thoroughbreds you're working with. So the actors are coming with so much ammunition and so much ability to discover and like not be afraid to interpret along the way. And to the point that like we wouldn't walk away unless we felt like we had it. That's a big part of the relationship. Do you think we got it? We got that take? Are we good to walk away from this? And I think, independent filmmaking is one thing. And, obviously you hear always about the lore of people like Stanley Kubrick, or I know Fincher does a lot of takes. Yeah, you do 150 takes to get it right, which, that's incredible. It's like daunting. And there's, an incredible consummate perfectionism in some artists. But you're also operating on a very large canvas at that point if you can, be doing that kind of stuff. So
I can't imagine editing where I had 100 takes of every single setup.
Oof.
I think I'd go crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
I guess that's where a good scripty comes in handy.
That's a hard job too.
Oh my gosh. I do not. That's one of the, there's a few positions that I've never personally done, like just in my years of everything. Scripty is one of the few that I've never, I've done pieces of it, obviously, like watching continuity or this, that, the other, but like the actual person with the binder, like my husband's done it, like full out script supervising.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's so vital, as you're there between the AD and the scripty. Just in terms of being able to go back and like reference things and even understand like where dialogue changed along the way, because there's so much information in the story.
Oh, for sure. Speaking of editing, I know you mentioned this a little bit as far as like handing things over to an editor and kind of having that trust in place. How do you find that you best work? Like, I know there's some directors who like, they have to edit it. Like that's the only way. Yep. I know for my favorite way of editing with my husband is whoever's directing will do a pass. Then the other one of us will do a pass. And then the director comes back and does another pass just to kind of like, and for this feature that we're editing right now, I had an amazing editor, friend, Tanya Lawhead. I'll shout her out because she's amazing. And she did the assembly cut for us. And then I went through and did like notes. And then my husband did a pass on the version. And now I'm sitting there doing a version, and then he's going to go and do another version. So it's very collaborative, but
I love that. That's cool. That's a good way to skin the cat,
I was going to say, but from what I know, I don't think that's a normal way of editing. So like, what's your process?
I mean, back in the day, I used to like to cut most of my stuff myself, but then after a certain point, I would get frustrated with the machines and the technology just because you're always having to learn it again or like figure out new assets. So I'll cut smaller stuff on my own, but I really have become a firm believer in kind of giving up the reins to editors to really help you to like see where the story has gone or how much you can explore differently. You know, part of me like wants to actually see every single frame of what you shot. But, you know, I think yet again, it's about like trusting the people you work with, you know, that you know that they're going to be good enough as craftsmen that they really aren't going to leave stones unturned. And so in the assembly, it's super important. I think I sit in there and really build the film out. And then from there, I think it's good to get out of Dodge for a while and just, you know, not hamper their creativity either. So it's kind of similar to what you're saying in the handoff system, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's all collaborative. That's the thing. You know, you can't be afraid to get notes along the way from people while you're doing the editing. And one of my producing partners did one of the last Scorsese movies, and he told me that Thelma Schumacher, who's arguably one of the greatest living editors of all time, and Scorsese screened a lot of their movies about 60 to 70 times and received notes back from audiences they don't know to then micro adjust the film.
Wow. We did our very first. I'd never really done test audiences outside of like, you know, you send something to a festival and maybe you'll edit it more after a festival run or whatever, where it was literally like a rough cut with like title cards saying where things were missing and there's no color grading, no sound design.
Yeah.
And I gave it to people who I trusted that they could see it in that stage and not like judge me. But some of them like were not filmmakers. They're just friends or family or whatever.
Yeah.
I've never had so much anxiety in my life as when I sent, okay, that's not true. I had a very high level. I've had more
high level.
I had a very high
disclaimer.
Giving it to them because I had no idea, but I can't imagine going through that process 70 times. I think
you'd lose your marbles.
I'm going to do, I think, one more round of notes. Just
okay.
We absorbed the first.
Moving forward. That's smart, you know, and with time, it's always good.
Yeah. Also, it lets people who saw it, and then you mix it up and have a couple people see it again so they can see the change. And then some people won't have seen it, so it'll be their first.
Totally.
See the difference. But
fresh eyes, plus, like, that's so important.
Yeah, especially when you're like, you've stared at the same screen for so long.
Craziness. I know. And you never see it the same way, even when it's finished. That's the problem.
And then you sit there watching it when it's done and you're like, I could have won. Obviously, you know, you mentioned working in commercials to start. Where would you suggest someone starts when it comes to beginning work as a director? And not just like career path wise, but even just like creatively, like if you're someone sitting at home who's like, man, I'd love to be a director. Like, where would you say they should start, or how do you think they should start?
I mean, the tools are all out there these days. Like, it's so different, you know, in terms of it being a technical craft than it was in, you know, the 60s or 70s. And certainly back then, you know, you had Super 8 cameras and, you know, you probably had like simple enough versions of Steenbecks that you could use at home, because I remember cutting something up very early on like something like that. But now it's all on your telephones, and you know, technology is so omnipresent in our lives. It's easy to basically get the gear to shoot stuff. So I think, you know, in the visual medium, you should basically start shooting stuff, start learning how to edit. That's even on your phones or your computers these days, and you know, understand what that process is as a canvas. You know, in terms of the technical part. And then to really, I think, dig into the work of what a director is. I mean, there's like great architects who become directors because of their architectural prowess and understanding of computer design skills. And so depending upon who you are and how your brain works, you're going to apply yourself to storytelling totally differently. But it's about exposing yourself, especially as a young person, to as much as possible in the world. I think, you know, just you have to see as many movies as you can, listen to as much music, go to as many museums, and, you know, travel, meet people, and keep notes along the way. Because that's really what's going to be the core of what the stories would be about, I think, ultimately. You know, even if you buy books or, you know, get handed screenplays and stuff, you still have to have opinions in life.
That's true. You just made me think of something when you're talking about like going to museums and traveling and stuff. I was like, I guess filmmakers are pretty much ambassadors of humanity. Like,
that's a good terminology. I would say we're more like vagabonds of the Western world, but that I think both are apropos.
well, I guess it depends where you're making your films, but
that's true. It could be gypsies of East Asia as well. There's a lot of like terms, but I think without a doubt, they are ambassadors. And I think ambassadors to culture and to ideas. And it's super interesting because, you know, you can make a story in, say, the U.S. that people in the U.S. are like, nah, it doesn't really click or have like a tonality I understand. But that movie could play in Germany and they'll say, wow, that's really what we think America's like. And so it is like really a point of conversation, like all artwork is, you know, kind of at this point in universe, like globally, that, you know, you can have something that informs cultures and the way we think about cultures. And it's fascinating.
it really is. So those were all kind of like my general questions.
That was great.
Thank you. I realized there was one question I was going to ask and I forgot to write it down.
Yeah.
It's actually specifically about Friendly Fire.
Okay. Yeah, I was so happy to hear that Spencer's such a big fan.
Oh, huge. Yeah, his I don't know if you know that he's actually a musician, a singer-songwriter.
Yeah. No, I do.
And his name is Spaceship. It's from Sean's song Spaceship.
Like, oh, funny.
That's where it got inspired to go. But and then my company name, well, it's our company now. When I named it, we weren't even dating yet. I just had a crush on him.
Funny.
But
so cool.
I was talking to him and I asked him, like, where does Spaceship come from? And he told me about the song. And I'm trying to think, I don't think I'd heard anything by Sean before. And I looked up the song and it was a great song. And I just really dug the lyrics and this idea of like going off and like bigger and better, just these like abstract kind of ideas. Totally. And I had just started Playstream Productions, well, a production company, and I needed a name. And someone said something about dreams or chasing your dreams. And I was like, that's cheesy. I'm gonna be like, there already is DreamWorks. Like, I don't need to.
Exactly.
And, then when I saw the lyrics, I was like, what about Space Dream?
Totally.
And that just like it.
That projects someplace totally different. I love that.
And then he asked me out on a date and now we're married and everyone thinks that I named it after him. And I was like, I have to know that if this guy doesn't like me, it's just a crush and it's going to be okay. But I have to be okay with this being my company name for the rest of my life.
Well, it sounds like it might have been some sort of serendipity along the way.
I think so. But
so cool.
Yeah. But so he and we've done a couple of music videos. One of the things that we like is not doing, I call them TNA pieces, where it's the fluoros and the girls and the boobs and the butts. Yep. And that's the music video. And you know, that's a style. If that's your style, that's a style. But
yeah, it's the thing.
So much music has so much more to it and there's so much more story to it. He actually played me the full, like it's like the series of videos, but like as like one long film. How do you take such seemingly disrelated pieces? Obviously they're not like completely disrelated because they're an album, but like find a story that weaves through all the songs like that and bring them together without like totally losing track. Like it just seems like a lot of moving pieces to keep track of. How do you direct something like that, I guess is my question.
I take a lot of drugs. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think no, with that one, it was like we were very close to that period. So like there was a lot of synergy and fusion and, you know, just like we trusted each other a lot. So, you know, I wrote that stuff pretty quickly, but I also was doing a lot of commercial filmmaking then. So I had really good teams and like they really, you know, went to bat on that stuff. So it was like just actually a great example of having a producer who was really defiant and daring. Like we didn't have the money we really should have had to do all that stuff, but we kept on pushing to points where it was just crazy. The kind of numbers of extras and talent and wardrobe and stuff that was all going into it, that it was just like going out on a limb ultimately. So that becomes infectious when you're working. And after a certain point, you're sleeping 3 hours a day. So you're basically living in a delirious dream for a good month anyway. So I just think it's, you can't be afraid to like just really like poke holes in like reality when you do that kind of stuff. Cause it's like that stuff for me, it comes from a much more dream kind of space component, So it's like, we wrote some ideas and then you hope that you can actualize them ultimately, because they were kind of far-fetched. And the storyline stuff was pretty easy on that, only in the sense that it was like kind of like just pick a genre and come up with a story that seems like it was a different iteration of who he was as a hero or an anti-hero and all those different pieces.
That's awesome. And don't do drugs, kids.
I was teasing when I said that I was talking about the Pepsid AC and Pepto-Bismol.
Of course. No, that's really cool. And that we're looking at doing a project for someone, and I mentioned that the idea of tying all their songs together, because they wanted to do one for their whole album, a different video for each thing.
Wow.
And I was like, at first I was like, what? And then I was like, wait a minute. I really appreciate your time, like, so much.
No, totally. No, I had a blast talking.
Awesome. Do you have any like closing statements or final words or anything you want to like, words of wisdom?
I don't know. We all just got to trust in the process, as people and like creators, as people who work and like all assets of life. Like, at this moment, it's so important to rebuild the world with like the world we want in mind. And like that starts out with your community and your friends. And so I think in creating films, you do your little part, but it's about everyone just kind of lifting each other up. I think that's the most important thing at this moment in the world. And the movie I made, I like to think addresses, certain topics like that, even though it's, not the most uplifting thing along the way. But don't be afraid to, look in those dark corners and actually say, like, we need to fix this. That's my political MO for the day.
Be an ambassador of humanity.
I like the ambassador of humanity. I'm still going to go with Vagabonds of the Western World, but that's maybe the trip I'm on for this week.
That works. I didn't even get a chance to ask about like the COVID side of stuff and how moving forward.
It was all after, honestly. Like we shot this movie before. It was basically just the sound mix that got affected, and then the release.
Oh, wow.
Like we weren't able to release it for probably a year plus,
Yeah, and then I know like the festival circuit's been like all a jumble, and it's just,
no, it was like we wanted to bring it to one of the summer festivals 2020, but they all got canceled or pushed or scaled back, and so it was a long period of re-understanding in terms of what's going to happen with this film. So, and I think it worked out in terms of the time window, but everything's very funky still right now with all that. It's not the best time to be releasing movies.
Oops.
Maybe it is. We don't know yet. So do me a favor, though. Please send all my best to Spencer, and hopefully we all get to catch up in person at some point if you ever make it back up to the city, and definitely talk on the phone when all this is finished up.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for your time. I really
have a great day. Hopefully you get some rest and take care of your man. You'll be good.
I will, for sure. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon. Ciao.
Bye.
You've been listening to Filmmaking Actually with Koura Linda, Space Dream Productions podcast. Subscribe to us on any or all the podcast platforms, but we especially recommend our sponsor, Anchor. If you like what you hear, leave us 5-star ratings and positive reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. It helps more listeners like you discover the show. But the best thing you can do if you really like the show is tell a friend. Want to leave a comment or ask a question? Email at filmmakingactually@gmail.com. This is Spacey speaking, and do you know why DPs don't smoke? Because it takes them 4 hours to light it. And we'll see you next time.